Is this recording? Yeah. I thought I'd do a little video. I'm looking a bit scruffy. I don't know why. I did just comb my hair, and I'm not. This isn't the same time as yesterday when I filmed the video in the same place. But I thought I'd do a little clip on the because a lot of the videos are quite negative. I think I feel that anyway. It's always like a vlog complaining about something political or some shitty thing that's happening in the country. So I thought it would be nice to show that it's not always negative. Just a little overview of the countries and places I think are the nicest in the world that I've seen thus far. It's obviously an opinion, but places that I would recommend for people to visit. So it's not going to be in a particular order because I haven't actually planned this. I'm just waiting to leave where I am now, which is a place near Chitwan, to go back to Kathmandu in Nepal. So I figured I'd do this. The first country that springs to mind is Bolivia. I think Bolivia, even though I had some crazy, very bad stories from Bolivia, objectively, I think it's one of the best countries to visit. I think in terms of, you have to have a kind of a balance of price, people, and environment. And by that I mean, are the people nice? It makes a big difference if, the culture's somewhat kind of how shall I put it, like miserable, and again, if something's super expensive, then it's kind of pointless going there because you can get better bang for your buck elsewhere. So, and then of course the environment. If it's just some kind of like desolate desert, then there's obviously not many variables there. There's not much interest compared to somewhere that has like a variety of different terrains. So I think Bolivia really hits the mark there. I think the people weren't like amazing, but there was nothing wrong with them particularly. I think it's safe for the most part, unless you get into a situation that me, the Austrian, and the German had. And in terms of like the landscapes, Bolivia obviously has it's got the Amazon basin, it's got the salt plains, salt flats, which I didn't visit to the south. It's got a lot of history with respect to having the largest silver mine in the world under Spanish control in the 19th century. Oh, I think way before that actually. I think it goes all the way back to the 1500s. But either way, which you can see, that's Potosi. And then, of course, you've got, the Che Guevara was killed there, south of Samaipata, which is a beautiful place. You have some nice music festivals. I really think Bolivia is a great place to visit. It's comparable to Kyrgyzstan, which is what I'll move on to next, whereby it's got a wide variety of landscapes. So in one single trip, you can experience, like I said, rainforest, high altitude, low altitude, and some special kind of geographical locations like the salt flats in Bolivia. Kyrgyzstan has skiing, and at the time, cheapest skiing in the world. It was €5 near Karakol for the ski hire, the transport to and from the slopes, and the day pass, all included for €5. You have high altitude ascents, you have beautiful valleys, you have deserts in the south where the arid, dry, cold deserts where the Pamir Highway begins. You've got a complete mix of cultures whereby obviously it's technically an Islamic country, though I wouldn't consider it to be that. Everyone's drinking vodka and calling themselves Muslims, which is fine. Well, I'm not judging. It's religion. It's not really. I don't see it as a reality anyway. So, but it really makes for a very enjoyable experience. You go to Osh, which still has one of the largest Lenin statues in the world, and then it's very Islamic there. It's got a lot of Uzbek influence, and then you'll head to the polar opposite, where it's much colder, where Issyk is and Karakol, and you have all the valleys there, and it's very typically kind of Soviet. There's a lot of Russians that still live there, people of Russian origin that still live there, so in terms of the complexion and the aesthetic, there's a lot of variation. Kyrgyzstan, as people might know, is my favourite country in the world, and I like to think it's subjective too. So I would put that up there. It's interesting. Again, this is spontaneous. I'm thinking again, what really stands out for me. I really liked Mexico as well. Now, Mexico is still number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for the highest murders in the world. I don't think that affects the average person. I don't think that affects tourism. It's generally cartel murders. Brazil is also in that list for top murder rates in the world. But I really feel that Brazil, you are affected personally by the violence in Brazil Brazil is very, very dangerous, and that's no exaggeration. I consider Brazil to be the most dangerous country in the world, way more than Afghanistan or anywhere like that. Because, again, the violence and the criminality affects all people at all times, including Brazilians. It's not just something that's targeted for tourists, in places like Rio or Sao Paulo. It really affects everyone. Mexico, I never really had so much of an issue there. A little bit of corruption during the whole kind of 2019 to 2021 period, but nothing crazy. And I think what Mexico has to offer is some of the most astounding beaches. It's changed a lot since I first went there, because a lot of Americans have been migrating continuously south since the whole COVID scenario. Prices have gone up, so they're somewhat exorbitant in parts of Mexico. But there's certain places that stick out in my mind as the best places to visit and places I would live. And Mexico just has a ton of them, really. One of my top places is Jalapa, which is close-ish to Puebla and Mexico City. It's in that area of central Mexico. And yeah, I think it's a fantastic place, beautiful place. And nearby you have all these coffee plantations and stuff. And there's little touristy towns nearby. I can't recall the name of it. But moving on to the next place, actually, and I really probably shouldn't rate the countries so much, but the places, because I don't want to contradict myself now, because I said Brazil is one of the most dangerous places. And a lot of Brazil, and it is fair to say a lot, I have been around the whole country, everywhere, multiple times, and for the size of the country, what you get in return is not that great. So people think Brazil is synonymous with the Amazon rainforest. Actually, most of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest is completely destroyed. And when I mean completely, I took a boat from Tabatinga, albeit I'm seeing, a landscape that's, on the riverbank and thereafter, so it's not really representative. But everyone knows Brazilian rainforests are getting cut down left, right, and centre for arable farming, for cattle ranching, all that kind of stuff. And really, what you see is just desolate kind of semi-desertification everywhere, just destruction, deforestation. So yeah, I wouldn't really rate Brazil in that respect, except Santa Catarina in the south, which is where Blumenau is, and there's a lot of Mennonite, Amish, a lot of German influence there, and people are obviously aesthetically very, very pale, blue eyes, blonde hair, and it's a completely different culture. And if you ask a lot of Portuguese people, they're not really kind of warming to that as such. They see them as kind of outsiders, which I find very ironic, because, sorry, I might have said Portuguese there, I can't remember if I said Brazilians, but obviously Brazil is a Portuguese colony and most people are of European descent. So I find it very comical that the Portuguese-speaking Brazilians, they're all Portuguese-speaking, but the Brazilians of a Portuguese origin don't like the German Portuguese, who also speak Portuguese, who settled there around the same time, because they look different. I find that very ironic. It's very strange. They settled there pretty much at the same time, longer than anyone else can remember, and I just find it comical that there's that clash. And it's just a clash of culture, really. That's what it comes down to. And I'll tell you what it really fundamentally is. Germans are very efficient. Germans are very, culturally, they're very disciplined. They're an industrial culture, BMW, Mercedes, most stable economy in Europe. Germany is synonymous with business acumen and industrial success. And when you go to a culturally German part of Brazil, of course they're all still Brazilian, they have Brazilian passports, you see the difference. It's clean, it's safe, it's fantastic. I had a great time in Santa Catarina, in and around Blumenau and Pomerode, I think it's called, Pomi something, which is where they have Brazilian Oktoberfest. And I wasn't there for that. I was there when it was very quiet. I was there when it was very quiet. It's very, it's very quaint, it's very pretty, it's very safe. The climate is more appealing. That's certainly somewhere to put at the forefront of one's kind of travelling itinerary if in the area. And I guess that leads on to Argentina. Now, I didn't really have a good time in Argentina, just because I wasn't there for that long, and it was years and years ago when Argentina was super expensive. Since then, obviously, the bubble exploded and it went into this kind of profound spiral where everything was basically buy one, get one free, and that's changed slightly now, but everyone that I meet loves Argentina, and I think Argentina probably would be up there. I can't really elaborate more on that. I didn't see that much. but I would probably put it in the top list. I guess moving on from there, where would be interesting, or not interesting, where would be in the top tier? I think if we go to Europe, I think Spain has a lot to offer, and I'm not talking about the Costa Brava or the Costa del Sol, the Spanish Riviera, all the English people hang out to drink, nor the islands. It's a similar principle, I think, for the most part. People just go for their package holidays to sit around in the sun for 2 weeks, drinking cheaper alcohol and going to nightclubs. I don't see that as an attraction. But in rural Spain, especially along the Portuguese border, places like Zamora, Salamanca, historical Spain, Spain obviously has got a history of being segregated between Islamic Moorish influence and Christian Aragon, essentially, and because of that, there's just phenomenal amounts of history with respect to the architecture, the castles, the bastions on various hilltops, the churches, the cathedrals, all that kind of stuff. So I'd certainly put Spain, rural Spain, that is, right at the peak, and I guess Portugal aligns to that somewhat. Although Portugal now is becoming a bit of a migration hub for people from Brazil, given the alignment between Brazil and Portugal, it's losing its face a bit, and I think that's the case with Europe. I think Europe is being destroyed by the second, which is why so many people opt to leave and migrate elsewhere, whether working remotely or just settling as permanent expats. I didn't want to make this video political, so we won't go into the origin of the mass migration. It's certainly not organic, but sponsored, and yeah, from there, I guess we could go to Eastern Europe. I think a little gem in Europe is Belarus. I think Belarus is one of the greatest countries. A little trivia fact would be that it's the only country ever to go from communism to capitalism and back to communism on preference. If you're to really define that political culture as communism, I personally don't think communism exists, but you could say it's more of a socialist. There's more socialist ideals there at the forefront, at least in the public eye, in the public sector, because communism is capitalism. One can't exist without the next. It doesn't really make any sense. If you look at the history of communism, it was funded by the Schiffer Bank in New York, Lenin, Trotsky, it was all paid for by gold bullion from New York banks. So actually it's not organic, it's not real. And the entire period of the Soviet Union, of course, their resources were being traded with capitalist countries. So if you're a communist nation, the only pure example of communism would be Cambodia's Pol Pot regime, which murdered millions of people, where if you were literate, you were almost killed or you were thrown into labor camps. That's as close to true communism as you can get, right? Being segregated from the rest of the world. But anyway, that wasn't the point of the video. So I would say Belarus is a solid bet. I think it's very safe, it's very cheap, it's very clean. People are very, very well brought up. The etiquette there is again, top tier. And given its proximity to the rest of Western Europe, it's certainly accessible. And I don't know what the visa situation there is now, but they did these experiments where you had certain regions like the Grozny region, you could get a visa on arrival if you had a cheap insurance policy for up to 10 days, which you could buy through the Belarusian government's website, and it cost about €10. That's probably changed now with what's happening geopolitically with obviously the Ukraine and Russia, and Belarus's alignment to that by default. But I'd certainly put that at the forefront. And from there, I think we should move south to Bosnia. Now, Bosnia and Herzegovina is very, very interesting. There's a system of shared governance there whereby, given that there's a lot of Serb influence in Bosnia and Herzegovina and a lot of Croat Islamic influence, there's a rotation of governments every 5 years. So there's a government that's backed by the Republic of Srpska, which isn't Serbia, but is a Serbian-backed republic, or republics within Bosnia and Herzegovina, both in the north and in the south. And Sarajevo is one of those kind of like melting pots, a city of so much history, of course. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was supposedly assassinated there in World War I, which we're led to believe set off the First World War. In reality, that's not true, of course. The First World War, the Second World War, most wars are created for industrial gain, industrial benefit, to reset the system. Of course, just like trading, you wait until there's a fire sale and then you buy back up into the system and monopolize it to a greater degree. Only that the wars were an artificial fire sale. So the war was created so that corporate interest could expand its influence. Obviously people will disagree with that, but it's an objective fact. I'm not talking about the stuff you learn in school as a 5-year-old when you open up a standard syllabus and textbook. That's all pure propaganda. But Bosnia and Herzegovina has so much fantastic history. I mean, even in Sarajevo, you had, of course, the Winter Olympics there. And then the bobsleigh track became essentially a sniper ground where Serb snipers were firing on Bosnian Croat citizens in the town, and there was a lot of history there. And as a whole, the country has a lot to offer with respect to obviously castles and all kinds of fortifications, and its geographical location is obviously brilliant too. You can migrate to the Dalmatian coast in Croatia and all that kind of stuff. So I would definitely put Bosnia at the top. There's not so many countries. I'm not randomly picking these. I've been to Bosnia probably 24 times, and I certainly rate it. And likewise, Romania as well. I think Romania has a lot to offer, different to its cousin south in Bulgaria. I really think Bulgaria has very little to offer. I know it's terrible to criticise countries, and that wasn't the name of the purpose of this video. But I think Romania has a phenomenal amount of history. You have Hungarian influence in the north, where Cluj-Napoca is, which is a big student party city. Timisoara was actually the first city in Europe to have electric streetlights, maybe even in the world, which is a very interesting fact. And of course, Serbia is famous for Nikola Tesla, and perhaps there's a correlation there between Timisoara, which is on the Serbian border, gaining. Well, it was of course Austro-Hungarian at the time, but gaining the electric streetlights before all other nations. You have obviously Count Dracula and all these ancient hilltop historic towns like Brasov, etc. So without going on a rant, I'll move on from there. I'm going to try and keep this video relatively concise. So far what have we got? We've got Romania, we've got Spain, we've had Bosnia, we've had Belarus, we've had Santa Catarina within Brazil, Bolivia, Mexico, and Kyrgyzstan. And I think for me, again, we're basing this on safety, bang for your buck, i.e. costs, and what it has to offer. There are certain places I've had a great experience in, like Mongolia and Madagascar, but I wouldn't put them on the top because I don't think there are enough variables in the experience for me to justify placing those in the top tier. Mongolia is, for the most part, a kind of vast, desolate, just vast, desolate plains. It's very, very cold. Of course, it has its beauty, and it's one of my favourite places, but I wouldn't objectively put it at the top. Madagascar is fantastic. There's so much there, but it's just too dangerous. It's just not as accessible, which for some people is great, and it's certainly a bonus to go to places other people don't go. But everything's about balance in life, I think. So to go somewhere that's just so off the beaten track, like Afghanistan, I wouldn't put Afghanistan top tier, even though I think it has phenomenal potential, and I had a great time there, and I had no issues. So I think Southeast Asia is not going to be in the playlist because it's filled with just groups of 18 to 24-year-old gap year students that go there to drink. It's too tourist orientated, similar to Nepal. I wouldn't put Nepal top tier either. It's just tourism everywhere, and it really takes away from a kind of pure experience. I think Japan has to be up there because Japan's one of those places that's just so far from the rest of the world with respect to how it orientates itself. Technological advancement means that pretty much everything is tech-based. People are so subdued by that kind of industrial drive and desire to work and impress and be the top and be respectful and all this kind of stuff that they've become kind of, I would say, desensitized. There's like a lack of emotion in Japan where everything is so systematic. They have one of the obviously largest declining birth rates in the world. You go to places and you'll have internet cafes where people will play video games for like a week. And even as someone that's like a tourist or someone that isn't keen on video games, they can still go to these places and you can rent out beds inside the video game centers because people there will, like I said, play for like a week. And they need somewhere to sleep. You have kitchens, you have showers, and you'll just see, like, again, the stereotype's not completely untrue, just kind of like fat Japanese guys sweating with like noodles splayed out all over their chest playing World of Warcraft, and they'd probably been there like 7 days before I arrived. So, but from an experience, from a tourist perspective, Japan has a lot to offer. And I think up in the north you have more kind of traditional ways of living, which are more, I guess, synonymous with, samurai culture and that kind of stuff. not to a full extent, but perhaps there's more contrasts with kind of typical city urban lifestyles that are in kind of in Tokyo and Nagoya and the big industrial cities. So I put Japan up there, and I've gone over the 20-minute mark. We'll make it 22 then. What else springs to mind? Yeah, I don't know. For me, I think those are the best ones. I haven't been to Iran yet. Unfortunately, they rejected the visa. Well, they didn't reject it, but they desired a tour to be booked because British, American, and Canadian nationals obviously don't get the freedoms, weirdly, that Europeans and other countries do, even though it's all one entity. It just shows that it's all BS. But I'd like to think Iran's up there. I'll end on one more country, and I think that really completes my set. Georgia. I think Georgia is accessible, it's cheap, it has so much to offer, some of the best trekking. Of course, has the Black Sea Riviera with Batumi, though that's not my cup of tea. It adds a bit of contrast. And it's kind of the whole Caucasus region is this just melting pot, and it's constantly bubbling and overflowing, not always for the best. Of course, we've got the war with Armenia and Azerbaijan. The latter took control of Nagorno-Karabakh, or retook control of Nagorno-Karabakh recently, so there's a lot of conflict in that region. You have the Turks who are Islamic, the Azeris are Islamic. The Turks obviously murdered the Armenians in a genocide. The Azeris are fighting the Armenians. The Armenians are Christian, backed by Russia. The Georgians hate the Russians, but they're also Christians, so they tolerate the Armenians. They also tolerate the Turks because Turkey's the most influential country in the region. It's just a complete mess and mix, and I think that gives it personality and vibe. And now you have a lot of Russians in Georgia that fled because of the fear of being conscripted into the military. Self-proclaimed liberal Russians, which certainly aren't my cup of tea, but it adds more flair. And I've been to Georgia probably 20 times now, at least 20 times. And I've pretty much always had a fantastic time there, and I would certainly put it top tier as well. So 4 seconds to 22, I'll leave it at that. I'll post this rant up, and all the best.